Hello and welcome to lesson 1 of geometry. So there's going to be about 7, there may be 8 lessons in total to get through the entirety of this topic. What we're going to do is I'm just going to assume that you've forgotten almost everything you've ever learnt about geometry. We're going to start right at the start and we're going to build right up to sort of an intermediate type high school level, which is where you guys need to be for your exams. So we'll be starting off with what is a polygon, going through naming polygons, and then we'll get into, we'll be spending a couple lessons on, the triangle, quadrilateral, and then the second half of this topic, we'll look at the angle sum of, higher polygons, things like octagons and nonagons, being able to find the angle sum and also the value of any missing angles that are in there. The second half does get a bit fun. The first half can be a little bit boring, but we'll see. You may enjoy it. Anyway, let's begin with what is a polygon? So it's a two-dimensional shape that has no curves or no gaps. That means all the edges need to be straight and there can't be any gaps in it. And obviously the 2D is referring to it's a two-dimensional shape. So this topic that we're in, this geometry topic, we're only dealing with polygons, to be honest. So all of the shapes we're going to be dealing with will be two-dimensional. There will be no curves, there'll be no gaps. So if you look here, we've got our first polygon of the topic. It's, funnily enough, a four-sided polygon, which we call a quadrilateral. This quadrilateral actually has a special name called a trapezium, but we'll cover that in other lessons. For the moment, all you need to know is all the edges are straight, there are no gaps in it, and it's two-dimensional. So that's why this first one here is a polygon. Looking at the second one, for the exact same reason, it's two-dimensional, so it's a flat shape. All the edges are straight and there are no gaps, so it's also a polygon. This one here happens to be a six-sided polygon, so this one here we would call a hexagon, but we'll go through those names later on in this lesson. Alright, now that we've had a look at what were polygons, here we can see some examples of some shapes or solid figures that are not polygons. If you look at this first one here, it's two-dimensional, so that's all good. All the edges are straight, so that's also good. But unfortunately, where it fails is the gap. So because there's a gap in it, the first one would not be considered a polygon. The second one, well, there's no gaps, so that's good. It's two-dimensional, but yeah, as you can see, obviously we have a curved edge, eliminating this from being a polygon. So again, we won't see any cool shapes like this at all in this topic either. And when we move on to the third one, well, all the edges are straight, there's no gaps in it, but it's not two-dimensional. So again, this, what looks like probably a square pyramid, is also not a polygon. Alright, so now that we know what is a polygon, two-dimensional, all the edges are straight, there are no gaps, we next need to know how to name them. So just starting off nice and simple, we all know the first one. It's got 3 sides. It's a triangle. This next one we go up by 1, we're on to the 4-sided polygons. We call these quadrilaterals. Lots of people say, no, hang on, I thought they were called squares, or I thought they were called rectangles, or aren't they called rhombuses? Any polygon that has 4 sides is called a quadrilateral. However, there are some special quadrilaterals which have their own unique names. But if it's got 4 sides, it is a quadrilateral. The next one, onto 5 sides, it's a pentagon. And again, looking at that, most people sort of recognize that from sort of like the Superman sort of upside down. But a pentagon is any polygon with 5 sides. So I could have just as easily of, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, pretending those sides are actually straight. that would also be considered a pentagon as well, right? So it doesn't have to look like a particular type. It's just if it's got 5 sides, it's a pentagon. Next up, we have the hexagon. So 6 sides is a hexagon. 7 sides, this is sort of like the first one that most people forget. Not sure why, I don't know, I never learnt it or remembered it, myself either, but it's the heptagon, right? So 7 sides is called a heptagon. The next one, 8 sides. So you're going from one of the ones that most people forget to one of the ones that almost everyone remembers. The 8-sided shape is called the octagon. Most people think of like an octopus as 8 tentacles, or, if you're into your MMA, you've got the octagon, the shape of the ring that they fight in. The last 2 that you're going to need to know by name is the 9-sided shape, which is called a nonagon. So here I've drawn a pretty crazy one. I guess technically you could say this isn't a nonagon because it's not even a polygon. I've got a little gap there, to be honest. But if I close that up, we can see, yep, hey, cool, here we go. We've got ourselves a nonagon. And the final one, you got 10 sides. Let's count them up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. Lucky me, I did it correct. We got 10 sides. It's called a decagon. Now, there are names for the polygons that go above that. You've got like the undecagon, or sometimes called a hendecagon, and a 12-sided shape is a dodecagon. That's kind of cool because that's like the 50-cent piece we have here in Australia. But as far as what you're going to need to know, you're going to need to know the names up to decagon. So I'm going to strongly recommend right now you pause the video, go back through and copy down the names and a diagram of the shapes of each of these in your books. So when you are prepping for your exam, you've got them all right there with you. So the first page, get them copied in, pause and then press play again. The second page, get those copied into your books. And final 2 shapes. Again, your shapes don't need to look exactly like mine. As long as it's a polygon that has 9 sides, you've got yourself a nonagon, right? So you can make your nonagon special to you. It doesn't need to look exactly like mine. Same as the decagon or any of the others. All right, first activity. So again, I'll get you to pause the video, copy down the 3 diagrams in your book. You can do different ones if you wanted as well. If you really wanted to test yourself, you can make up your own sort of shapes. But what I want you to do is name the following shapes. Once you've finished doing that, press play again on the video and I'll put down the answers for, well, these 3 at least anyway. All right, so hopefully you've gone ahead and done this. If you've just done it in your head, that's cool. If you actually wrote it down in your book and you've got all your notes going nice and neat, that's even better. The first one, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5-sided polygon. You should have had pentagon for the first one. Okay, this second one, looking a bit like a weird Pac-Man. Let's count it up. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So you may be thinking, hey, hang on a sec. 8 sides, that is octagon. That is actually the correct answer. If you look back, I think we had an octagon here. Looked completely different, right? This one was looking, well, at least close to what we call a regular octagon. This one here looks really weird. It doesn't matter. It's a polygon with 8 sides. It would be called an octagon. All right, and the third one, well, what answer would you put here? I guess technically this is a trick question because it's not even a polygon. So it's got the 4 sides. So if you wrote down quadrilateral, congrats, because you're definitely thinking along the right path. A 4-sided polygon is called a quadrilateral. But unfortunately, this one here, wouldn't be any of those names at all because the thing is not even a polygon. I guess technically, if you wanted to break it down, this is a shape we would call a composite shape because it's made up of 2 separate shapes joined. You've got what appears to be a quadrilateral down the bottom with part of a circle stuck on top of it. So in this case, there's no real answer there for it. All right, let's move on to the final part of this first lesson, which is the triangle. So we're going to spend a little bit of time on the triangle. And the first thing we're going to cover with the triangle is, well, the classifying. What are the special names for the different types of triangles? And here we go, we've got 3 names. Every single triangle you could ever draw will be either an equilateral triangle, that is, all sides are equal. It could be an isosceles triangle, which is what you call a triangle when 2 of the sides are equal. And if none of the sides are equal, it's called scalene. So no matter what triangle you draw or what triangle you're given in an exam or the textbook, if that shape is a triangle, it will be either equilateral, isosceles, or scalene. It'll definitely be one of those 3 types. And it's just based on, how many of the sides are equal. So technically this first one here is missing these dashes here. So the way these work is you have a side which has a single dash. This first one right here, I just make it a bit more bold so you know which one I'm talking about. That side has a single dash on it. Any other side that also has a single dash on it will be the same length. So as you can see, the other 2 sides also have the single dash. All 3 sides are the same length. It would be an equilateral triangle. And as you can see down in the isosceles, only 2 of the sides were equal, so it's isosceles. And the final one, the scalene, that dash is not meant to be there. In this case here, you can see all 3 sides definitely a different length, which is why now, at least anyway, they have a different amount of dashes on each, indicating all 3 sides have a different length. It would be what they called scalene. So when you get asked to classify a triangle, it will be one of these 3. But there's a little bit more to it, because triangles also have a second name. So the first set of names is based on the side lengths. How many of the sides are the same length? But triangles are made up of side lengths and angles. If you look at the angles, they also give us a new set of names. If you look at the first triangle on this page, all 3 angles, 1, 2, and 3, all 3 angles are acute angled. That is, the actual size of the angle is less than 90 degrees, right? So it would be acute. If you have a triangle where all 3 angles are acute, we call it, not surprisingly, acute angled, right? And look over here, all angles are acute. The next triangle down, if the triangle has a right angle, we can see that here by the square. So we've got ourselves a 90-degree angle here, which we call a right angle. If there's a right angle in the triangle, we call it a right-angled triangle. And here you can see over here in the notes, it contains a right angle. And the third type of triangle you get is where there's an angle that's more than 90 degrees. So the actual size of the angle is larger than 90. You end up with an obtuse angle, something that is greater than 90 degrees. And of course, we call them obtuse angled triangles. So any triangle that is ever given to you has actually 2 different classifications. One classification based on how many sides are equal, and one classification based on the types of angles that it has. So when you get to your exam or textbook exercise and the question asks you to classify the triangle, or for example, this activity you're about to do here, the question will typically ask you to classify the triangle based on both its side length and angles. So what they're asking for you to do is to give both names for each triangle. So here we've got 3 different triangles here, and each one of these triangles will have 2 different classifications you need to give. the first classification. We can see over here in the first cloud, I've written them again on this page here, just so you don't need to scroll back in the video or look back through your book. Hopefully you got your notes in. Equilateral, isosceles, or scalene. So each one of these triangles will have one of these classifications, and it'll also be one of these, either acute angled, right angled, or obtuse angled. So what I'm going to get you to do is, again, pause the video, and for each one of these three triangles, write down the two classifications, the one from each cloud that belongs to each. Once you've done that, unpause the video and just make sure that you've got the correct answers, and this will actually complete our first lesson in geometry. Okay, so hopefully you've done it. For the first triangle, looking at the sides, we can see this one here, two of the sides are equal. So this first triangle is what we would call isosceles. And looking at the angles, I can see it has a right angle in it. So this triangle is isosceles and right angled. So that's the classification for the first one. Looking at the next triangle, all three sides are different. So going through, that would be scalene. And looking at the angles, I can see this one here has an obtuse angle in it there, one of those big wide angles. So this would be scalene and obtuse angled. And final question in this lesson, what did you get for this one? Hopefully you got isosceles, recognizing that two of these sides were the same length. And in this case, all three angles are acute. So you should have had acute angled. Right on. So that brings us to the end of the first lesson. So when you're ready, I'll get you to go on to the second part in our series on geometry, where we'll continue our work on the next thing, which will be the angle sum of triangles. This second lesson is going to be based entirely on triangles, and starts to get a little bit more fun from just the basic classifying that we did in the first lesson. All right, so I'll see you then once you're ready. All right, thank you.